Chapter 56. Get him. The bandits charged at Raon, following the underboss's command. Raon easily dodged the bandits' attack by tilting his head slightly, then he thrust his sword in his direction in a straight line. Ugh! Before he could even think about dodging, the bandit's heart was pierced and he collapsed. Stab! Looking for an opening, the bandit at his right thrust his spear. Raon parried it using the side of his sword, then sliced the bandit's throat and the spear handle in a single strike. The bandit died with his eyes wide open. He looked like he didn't even realize he was dying. How are you so resolute at your age? Because these kinds of people are better off dead. Raon coldly glanced through the bandits. They were fiends that burned up an entire village and took children hostage. He didn't feel guilty about killing them. What are you doing? Attack him at once. He's just a kid. Die. Arf. 20 bandits holding swords, spears, and sabers lunged at him at once. Whap! When Raon brandished his sword, silver frost came out from the ground and engulfed the bandits. It was Raon. She'd spread the frost to slow down the bandits. Thud! Raon thanked her by nodding to her slightly, then moved to the bandits' left side. Why, you bastard! Facing the bandits swinging their swords at the same time, Raon kept dashing ahead instead of dodging. Grazing the bandits' swords, he swung his sword upward. The blade dyed in red sliced through two bandits at once. Die! The bandit behind them tried to skewer him with his spear. The deadly spearhead was thrust at Raon's heart. He lowered his body. The spearhead cut Raon's hair and scattered it in the air. Ha! Two bandits, one holding an axe and the other a sword, lunged at him right after. Slide! Raon moved back smoothly and sliced the bandit's neck when he was caught off guard. Catch up with him. Slippery bastard. You don't need to come at me. Raon used the river footwork to turn his ankle. Bending his body forward, he leapt like lightning. Since I'm coming to you. Breaking through beneath the bandits that were chasing after him, Raon swiped with the star-combining sword. Slash! The lightning-fast consecutive strikes sent the heads of 4 bandits flying. Ha! When Raon stopped his sword to catch his breath, a powerful murderous intent appeared behind him. It's him! It was the underboss that had been staying back, looking for an opportunity. Without turning, Raon bent his back. The underboss's greatsword went over him, cutting his bangs. The golden hair fluttered in the air. How did you dodge that? By doing well. Raon swung his sword up at the confused underboss. Whack! Since he was in an awkward position, the strike didn't carry much strength. However, the underboss still bounced back, unable to withstand it. Attack! Rip him into pieces. The underboss and bandits holding all kinds of weapons flooded at him like a wave. Rusty swords and spears were aimed at his heart, and thick axes walloped at his head. Thud! Raon took a deep breath and stepped on the ground. He sliced his sword, which contained the energy from the 10,000 Flames cultivation, diagonally from left to right. 10,000 Flames cultivation. Wind of flame. The blade of heat, carried by the wind, sliced through the underboss and the bandits at the same time. Kook! Ha, ha! Unable to believe their death, the bandits were split in half and collapsed. Arg! Monster! How can a child like that? The last few remaining bandits backed away with trembling hands. Where is your bow? Wow, this is ridiculous. A man wearing an unbuttoned top came out of the bushes. Despite his young face, at about 30 years old, his pressure was extremely violent. Raon understood from his strong malice that he was the ringleader. Boss. Leader. A light of hope shone upon the bandits that had been trembling in fear. As expected, that man was the Snow Tiger's leader. How can you get annihilated by a small kid? I just get humiliated even if I joined the South-North Union like this. The man giggled, bringing the liquor bottle he had around his waist to his mouth. There was no sign of anger, despite many bandits having died. Instead, he seemed to find the situation interesting. "Those are some very elegant faces and clothes. You gotta be from a rich family, huh?" The bandit boss giggled and pointed at Raon, then Runan. "Well, that's better. I was worried my presents weren't enough, but I'm gonna take you hostage. It seems Bukan, haven't been abandoned by heaven." Introducing himself as Bukan, the bandit boss drew his saber. He started spinning a saber as thick as a log as if it was a leaf. If his name is Bukan, he's indeed the boss. That was the name of the Snow Tiger's leader, the one that Rimmer had mentioned before. The fact that his might was above average among the aura users also matched the description. He was the strongest opponent so far. However, there was no tension, as he was an opponent Raon could easily win against. "Come at me. Since you are a young master, I'll let you have a head start." Bukan giggled, and put his fingers together, wagging them. "Fine." Raon signaled Runan to stay back, then stepped up. "Let's see how strong this kid is." While Bukan was carelessly blabbering, Raon thrust his sword at his neck. Whoosh! The blade, filled with the energy of the 10,000 flames cultivation, lunged at Bukan's neck. "Ha!" Bukan gasped and swung his saber. Spinning like a windmill, the blade managed to deflect the sword's trajectory. Smack! Smack! The powerful impact pushed both Raon and Bukan back at once. "Wow, that's pretty strong." Bukan's eyes glowed like a hungry beast. "Very interesting." Bursting out in laughter, he pounced. Rotating his saber, he slammed it down. Raon didn't face the attack head-on. Instead, he dodged it by turning his body. Crash! The saber split the ground upon reaching it. It was a monstrous strength. "Ha-ha-ha-ha!" Bukan laughed like crazy and continuously slammed down his saber. As a gigantic saber dominated the space, his movement grew more and more restricted. "You are going to be sliced to death if you keep trying to dodge. That's none of your business." Raon calmly kept using the footwork and blocked the strikes. "TSK, I guess we don't need to continue this any further if that's all you've got." Bukan pouted and kept swinging his saber. The huge saber that was riding the wind shone blue and exploded with a powerful energy. "Just die." The moment his saber rose into the air and his motions grew large, red lightning struck Raon's eyes. 10,000 flames cultivation, first flame. Flame spirit. Flame appeared at the tip of the silver blade and blossomed, riding the wind. Slash! The fierce energy of the small flame cut through Bukan's saber and cut him at his waist. Gah! Bukan screamed, grabbing the sword stabbing into his ribs. "Why, you bastard!" Holding the blade, he pushed back with tremendous strength. It looked like he wasn't the boss for nothing. Die! Holding the sword stabbing his ribs with his left hand, he swung his saber at Raon's neck with his right hand. Pointless. Raon dodged the cut by tilting his neck slightly, then used Bukan's strength to thrust his sword in even more to the right. Kook! A brutal amount of blood gushed from Bukan's side. Releasing the sword he was holding, Bukan backed off. What's everyone doing? Kill him. Do you want to die here? Eek. Let's go. Save the boss. The bandits dashed towards Raon at once, hearing Bukan's shout. Phew, phew. Raon caught his breath and swung his sword. Using Sieghart's basic technique, he decapitated the bandits running at him and sliced their legs. Kook. Arg. Ugh. The wall of bandits screamed and collapsed. Where is he? Raon looked for Bukan's location while swinging his sword. He wasn't there anymore. He couldn't find his location with his perception either. He escaped. The boss had used his underlings as a shield in order to run away. It was an act befitting of a bandit. Raon grit his teeth and emanated his pressure. I don't have much time. Unlike him, Bukan should have been familiar with the surrounding area. It was going to be difficult to catch him again if he escaped. Whir! He swung his sword, using the 10,000 flames cultivation at its full power. The moment the blade died in red slice like lightning, the bandits in front of Raon had their heads separated from their bodies. Ku! Ah! The bandits foolishly collapsed before they even realized they were killed. Arf! And no. We can't win against that. He's a monster. Be boss. Boss. Ha? Did that son of a bitch run away? Surrender. I surrender. The last few remaining bandits screamed. Upon realizing the leader had run away, they all dropped their weapons and knelt down. Runan. After checking the bandits that surrendered, he looked at Runan. I'll follow the leader. Kill them without hesitation if they try anything funny. MHM. Runan casually answered while hugging the children tightly. The bandits' faces went pale. Later. Using the Ring of Fire and 10,000 Flames cultivation, Raon took off. Entering the area that the bandits came from initially, he widened his perception and rolled his eyes. Where is he? Since the traces of bandits were everywhere, it was difficult to track him down. However, he couldn't hide his sound. Southwest. His hearing, enhanced by the perception of the snowflower, caught a rustling sound from a bush in the southwest. Thud, thud. He ran like the wind towards the source of the sound. It didn't take long before he found Bukan's presence, his back visible. What's that? Bukan wasn't alone. He was running through the forest like a madman, holding a woman in his arms. That's as far as you go. Raon cut him off, running at full speed using the river footwork. Shit. How did you chase after me? Bukan stepped back with trembling lips. Don't come. I'll kill her if you come any closer. Putting his saber on the woman's neck, he threatened. I'm at the end of my rope. I'll kill her if anything goes wrong. Then you will also die. Raon didn't succumb to his threat. Using the 10,000 Flames cultivation and Ring of Fire, he slowly approached him. Showing weakness because of the hostage is the worst thing to do. He needed to show him that the hostage didn't have any effect on him in order to catch him off guard. And the hostage was actually meaningless to him. Damn it! The leader screamed and threw away the woman he was holding. Ha! Raon ran up and caught the falling woman with his left hand. Thank you. The moment the clean woman nodded at him, a blue snake popped out from her sleeve. We did it! Bukan cheered. What did you do? Raon laughed coldly and stabbed the sword in his right hand. Whack! Piercing through the snake's head, the blade also crushed her heart. Kook! How? Earlier, he said there were 39 bandits in total. You must be the last one. What kind of crazy bastard counts that? The woman couldn't close her eyes as she died because of how ridiculous that was. And she was too clean for a hostage. Actually, that wasn't everything. The ring with red lines that she had on her finger was the mark of a snake user. The number of bandits was one thing, but he noticed she wasn't a hostage from the ring and her clean appearance. Who are you? Bukan, the snow tiger leader screamed. He just kept trembling, plopping down on the ground. It seemed he'd realized he couldn't run away. It must have been fun when you were the one doing the killing. Pulling the sword from the woman's heart, he approached Bukan. Gee, get away! Bukan screamed, frantically swinging his saber. His gaze, which used to be fierce, was now trembling in fear. You attacked and plundered the village, even took children hostage. You are worse than a fiend. I'm sorry, but there are many fiends that can do worse. I mean, there are countless. Ignoring wrath, Raon approached Bukan. Shut up! Bukan leapt up like a grasshopper and swung his saber. The saber's sharp blade, full of aura, glowed menacingly. However, the Ring of Fire had already finished analyzing his techniques. Raon swung his sword after easily dodging it. Slash! Buchan's right arm fell to the ground. Qua! You don't even have the right to scream. W8, I'll give you an elixir. The elixir I got in that village. Kook! Raon severed his head without hesitation. The head of the disgraceful bandit fell to the ground and rolled away. Ha! Catching his breath, he sheathed his sword. He mentioned an elixir. He said he'd attacked the village for the elixir. He must have kept it somewhere in his body. When he examined Buchan's clothes, he found a small pouch. This is it. He opened the pouch. There was a flower bud that hadn't burst yet. It was a strange bud with leaves that were half blue and half red. For such a petty reason. Raon frowned while touching the flower bud. It was an elixir called Teuton flower, which had the energy of both fire and water attributes. It was rare, but it wasn't something so extraordinary that it would warrant annihilating an entire village. Tisk. He regretted killing Buchan so quickly. Human greed is like that. It seems the King of Essence is getting to witness more greed here in the human world than back in the Devildom. What an interesting world. Raon didn't respond to Wrath. He wasn't ignoring him, but he couldn't rebuke it because Wrath was correct. It was as Raon was about to head back, licking his lips, that his head suddenly started hurting. He remembered something from the 10,000 Flames cultivation. Teuton flower. That wasn't the true form of the flower that didn't blossom. If I had that, it would become a much more potent elixir, huh? The moment he realized Teuton flower's true form, thanks to the knowledge from the 10,000 Flames cultivation, he felt the presence of someone moving in the southern bushes. Rustle. A man appeared through the bush. He was wearing a tiger skin leather jacket and a yellow bandana on his head. He could either be a hunter or a bandit. Ha! Is everything over already? He licked his lips, looking at the snow tiger leader's corpse at his feet. All the efforts of coming to help him through Sieghart's encirclement was in vain. The man in a tiger leather jacket raised his head and met Raon's eyes. Did you do this? That's pretty amazing. South North Union, huh? A yellow bandana was the mark of South North Union, which was one of the 5 demons. The fact that he'd appeared in that place, and the way he seemed to feel sorry about the Snow Tiger leader's death, all proved that he was from the South North Union. My name is Raptor. He introduced himself. It seemed he didn't need to hide it. Raptor. Raon frowned upon hearing the name. It was a name he'd heard in his previous life. The genius swordsman who had become the boss of a large group of bandits in South North Union 10 years after joining them with nothing but a single sword. Unlike the Snow Tiger leader, Raptor was a real warrior at a different level. Did you take the elixir he had? What if I did? Raon nodded. Since he'd arrived when he was looking at the Teuton flower, it was impossible to hide it anyway. You look confident. Well, I guess your judgment is also pretty good, despite your age. He looked at the snake user. And you are pretty strong. I guess that's why you can be so confident. After checking the headless Buchan's corpse, Raptor's gaze was directed at Raon once again. Descendant of a great family, you must be a member of the direct line of Sieghart, one of the 6 kings. Considering you don't have the flame sword emblem, you must still be a trainee. What shall I do? He licked his lips while fondling the sword around his waist. Shall I kill you? Chapter 57. Raon bit his lip. The moment Raptor mentioned killing him, he was engulfed in an intense murderous intent. However, murderous intent wasn't really effective on him, someone that had lived as an assassin. He pushed back the murderous intent by resonating the 4 rings of fire. Oh! Raptor exclaimed, with his eyes wide. His lips parted in his curiosity at how he managed to withstand his murderous intent. This guy isn't a sprout, but a bud ready to burst. He smirked and tapped the sheath of his sword. It seemed he was contemplating whether he should use it or not. I can't win against him. Assassinating him was possible, but winning against him in a straight fight was impossible. However, Raon also had a card up his sleeve. Clank. Raon drew his sword first. Draw your sword and fight. He revived the pressure that had subsided and pointed his sword at Raptor. Do you realize you will die if I draw this sword? It's natural for the weak to die. Ha! How is this young guy so spirited? Raptor exclaimed and clapped. His hands were now completely away from his sword. I don't want to fight anymore, not after witnessing your spirit. It'd be a shame to kill you here. A warrior doesn't choose his place to die. Wow, that's crazy. Are you really a kid? Am I reading an intellect right now? Well, that's not actually the only reason. Raptor's gaze went over Raon and reached the top of a tree. Even if I manage to retrieve that elixir, it's pointless if I end up dying instead. He nodded towards the tree and withdrew. I knew it. Raon licked his lips. The instructors were currently hiding behind him. He couldn't find Rimmer's location, but he must have been close considering his character. Raptor withdrew because he'd sensed their presence. It would have been really fun if you were in the South-North Union. What's your name? Raon closed his eyes without answering. Raptor's question reminded him of his old memories. When he lived as an assassin in his previous life, people rarely asked anything like that. Even if they did, he wasn't allowed to answer. He'd always either run away without saying anything or attack them with the intent to kill. His heart shook slightly to the fact that an enemy, and a person famous for his might, had asked his name. Are you not going to tell me your na? My name is Raon. Raon Zighart. Raon slowly opened his eyes, and confidently stated his name. I see. Raon, I'll be looking forward to hearing your name from the Tarukan Mountains and Rabble River. He grinned and went down the mountain. Raon stayed alert just in case he decided to return, but he was really gone. Ha! Raon sighed and sheathed his sword. It worked. Raptor had a manly personality, despite his pretty appearance. He managed to leave a favorable impression from acting rashly in an unfavorable situation. It all went according to the information he received in his time at House Robert. I'm glad it ended without a fight. Raptor was strong. He would have been able to win if he fought with Rimmer, but multiple instructors would have died. Avoiding the fight was the best-case scenario. Raon put the elixir in his shirt and put the Snow Tiger leader's head in a thick bag. He needed to bring the head back in order to get the accomplishment. Then let's return. He smiled towards the top of the tree. Rimmer had already located the bandits when the children started the search. Once he erased the distractions, the dense forest and high mountains, he immediately realized the location of the bandits' hideout. However, that was because he'd accumulated countless experiences, and it was a different story for the trainees. Just like he'd expected, the trainees went to the mountain and the forest first. Bayan and Martha weren't an exception. They were both headed towards the mountain and the forest and started searching like a hunting dog on a scent. Since it was such a natural thing to do, he wasn't even surprised. However, Raon and Runan were standing still on the road instead of moving away. They only started moving a long time after the other trainees had already started the search. And the direction they decided to go wasn't the forest or the mountain, but the hills. Really? The bandits had picked the forest next to the hills as their hideout, the one that wasn't visible from the outside. It was difficult to determine how they managed to find out about it. It's Raon after all. It seemed Raon determined that the bandits were in the hills using his excellent insight. However, as expected of bandits that live in the mountains, they'd erased most of their tracks. It was difficult even for the instructors to find them, so it would be impossible for Raon and Runan to find the bandits' presence. However, after looking through the forests on the hills, Raon looked like he'd found something as he went in. Then, he found the traces of humans one by one, and slowly advanced towards the bandits' hideout. What the hell was he? Rimmer's jaw dropped. He was on his first mission, yet he was finding the bandits' traces like a professional tracker. That was ridiculous. And he wasn't even advancing normally. Lowering his body, he wasn't even making any sound because he was walking on the tips of his toes. Wow, did he just dismantle that trap? Raon and Runan removed the trap installed by the bandits and finally reached the bandits' hideout. And there was a hostage that Rimmer didn't even know about. What are you going to do? Rimmer moved closer to the tree that the kid that was taken hostage was bound to. He was going to make his move if Raon or Runan ended up failing. However, it wasn't necessary. Raon distracted the bandits standing guard, using Runan as a bait, then beheaded the one guarding the hostage. Gulp! The sharp and definite strike sent chills down his spine. The way he blocked the sound with an energy barrier and killed the other bandit was also perfect. Then he gathered information by leaving one bandit alive. He really looked like a professional. However, there was one mistake. No, it was a coincidence. The inaudible whistle. The underboss detected the whistle that one needed to be trained to hear. Raon wasn't flustered when facing such a crisis. He immediately came up with a new plan, hiding Runan and the child. He leaped in after making the underboss and the bandits careless, rescuing the second hostage in one fell swoop. The rest was a battle. Fiddling with his fingers, Rimmer watched the battle with Raon on the front line and Runan on the back line. He stretched his legs, so that he could be prepared to help them if things got dangerous, but that never happened. Runan spread her frost and Raon swung his sword. The bandits couldn't even swing their weapons and ended up dead. The bandit leader, who came out while pretending to be cool, abandoned his underlings and ran away when he realized that he couldn't win against Raon. I'll need to catch him myself. There wasn't enough time to catch the leader after killing the rest of the bandits, not while protecting the two hostages. Since he couldn't let the leader escape, Rimmer started chasing the leader. Hostage? No, that was also a bandit. The leader went down the hills, carrying the female bandit like a hostage. Then let's catch. Just as Rimmer was about to make a surprise attack, he heard someone running up from behind. It was Raon. He was dashing towards the bandit leader's location like a lion. The leader pretended to panic and threw the female bandit at him, and Raon slowed down to catch her. Shit! Rimmer frowned. The woman was a snake user. He needed to save Raon before he got bitten by the snake. However, the moment the snake came out, Raon moved his right hand. Whack! As if he knew about it already, he pierced through the snake and the woman's heart with his sword without any hesitation. Wow! Rimmer's exclamation leaked out. He showed no sign of confusion as he killed the snake. It wasn't something he could have done unless he'd realized it beforehand. How could someone like him exist? He wasn't even admiring it anymore. His mind was going numb. He'd seen countless talents by wandering from one battlefield to another for dozens of years, yet this was his first time seeing such a monster. After decapitating the Snow Tiger leader, Raon even took the elixir he had. Yes, good job. He held himself back from applauding. When he looked aside, the other instructors were also astonished. Just as he thought everything was over, a pretty young man appeared with an intense pressure. Yellow bandana and powerful energy. It was a warrior from South North Union. So, they were associated with the South North Union after all. He was wondering why the Snow Tiger bandits were still hiding, and it was because they were waiting for the warrior from the South North Union. The warrior introduced himself as Raptor. He knew that name. The genius young swordsman that became the leader of bandits a mere 10 years after joining the South North Union. Raon wasn't intimidated by Raptor. He drew his sword, telling him to fight. That guy. It wasn't because he didn't recognize Raptor's strength. It was his determination that he wouldn't surrender as a Zieghart's warrior. Raptor was dumbstruck, but also admired Raon's spirit. Then he withdrew on his own. Of course, he did that because he knew that the instructors, including Rimmer, were hiding nearby, but his hospitality towards Raon was one of the reasons. I'm Raon. Raon Zighart. Ah. Watching Raon, who confidently stated name, after being recognized by somebody stronger than him, made chills run down his spine. The scene of him meeting Glenn in the past replayed in his head like déjà vu. Rimmer clenched his fist. King. He was still young and weak, but it seemed the seed of the new king had finally sprouted. Raon returned to Runan and the children. The instructors that had arrived after hearing the inaudible whistle had already suppressed the leftover bandits. You are back. That was a great accomplishment. Who the hell are you? The instructors spoke, full of admiration, surprise, and astonishment. Raon. Runan approached him, holding the two children. The eyes of the kids wearing robes were completely swollen. It looked like they'd cried their hearts out. Runan. You really did great. It wasn't just a formality. He'd managed to safely rescue the children thanks to her appropriate action. MHM. Runan visibly nodded. She looked happy as she patted the children's heads. Raon, who was about to pat the two children's heads, stopped when he realized that his hand was stained in blood. It's all right now. He grabbed the children's shoulders and smiled lightly. He wanted to keep talking to them, but he couldn't think of anything to say. Wah! The boy started crying while hugging his little sister tightly. It seemed he'd been holding himself back as the older brother. You guys should return for now. The instructors pointed towards the foothold under the hills as they dug into the ground. What about the instructors? We will follow after taking care of this place. Leave the rest to us. You really did a great job. The instructors put their thumbs up. Okay. Raon nodded and left the forest full of bandit stench, Runan and the children following him. Don't you even know how to comfort kids? Back in the Devil Dome, the King of Essence once faced a greater famine. Taking pity on the starving young devils, the King of Essence opened the Winter Castle's door and... Old man, that's enough. Moreover, how did you take so long to kill mere bandits? Don't you feel embarrassed that you can't even use your power properly, despite having the King of Essence with you? How am I supposed to use my power? You idiot. It's the first strike. First strike. You have to thrust your first strike with explosive power. Explosive? Yes. The human's mana circuit is quite mysterious, and you can handle your mana after amplifying it. Raon learned a more effective way of handling mana by instigating wrath. He was the giving wrath, after all. When Raon and Runan returned to the foothold along with the children, the center was noisy. It's the mountain. I'm sure they are hiding at the peak. Bullshit. Mountain is too obvious, just like your hairstyle. You're an idiot for thinking that they would be hiding in the mountain just because they're bandits. I'm sure they're hiding in the dense forest in the west. Your method is too impulsive. Relying on instincts without a proper tracking technique or map reading is too dangerous. Shut up. My instincts are better than your reasoning. We will search the western forest tomorrow, no matter what. Bayan and Martha were arguing, telling each other that there were bandits where they'd scouted. Phew, they're at it again. They really start arguing as soon as they meet. But I wonder who's correct. The trainees didn't know what to do as they watched the two growl at each other. Humph. When Runan cleared her throat, everyone looked at Raon, Runan, and the children. Who are those children? Did you find some runaway kids when you were supposed to look for the bandits? Bayan and Martha frowned, upon seeing the two children. I wonder. Guess who? Raon grinned, putting the bag containing the bandit leader's head down. Chapter 58. Did you say those children were taken hostage by the bandits? Bayan's blue eyes widened, nearly wide enough to pop out of his head. Rescuing the hostages means you found the bandits. Stop lying. Martha shoved her face at Raon, telling him to stop speaking nonsense. The two of them, no, every trainee in the foothold was stunned, unable to believe they'd managed to rescue the hostages from the bandits. Think whatever you want. Raon snickered and brought the children near the bonfire. Rest here for now. Letting them settle in front of the fire, he gave them some of the beef jerky that Sylvia and Helen had prepared for him. You can eat this for now. Thank you. Thank you. The boy lowered his head and the girl copied him, lowering her head as well. The two children started nibbling on the beef jerky. Their eyes were teared up with sorrow. Dorian. Yes. Do you have a blanket? A clean one. Of course I do. Thank you. Dorian took out a long green blanket from his belly pocket. Raon covered the children's shoulders with the blanket. Eat this, too. Runan met the children's eyes by kneeling down. She took out the ice cream box from her bag, opened the lid, and handed it out to them. The last two remaining beet ice creams. Moreover, even though she'd kept her favorite flavors for the end, there was no hesitation in her gesture. What is this? The girl tilted her head. It's ice cream. Runan told them that it was cool and delicious, and cleaned the girl's hand before giving the ice cream. Ah! The girl screamed after trying to touch the ice cream with her tongue. Of course, it was a pleasant scream. Using her small tongue, she started licking the ice cream like a kitten. Whoa! The boy's eyes were wide after taking a bite. However, he gave the rest of the ice cream to his little sister instead of finishing it. Raon licked his lip as he watched the two children. He felt bitter. He became an adult. Just like with the bandits, he was thinking about his little sister before anything else. It seemed the boy that had lost his parents had already grown into an adult. Raon thought he was better than his previous life, where he could only follow Darius Roberts' instructions, and lightly tapped the boy's shoulder. Ha! He actually managed to defeat the ice cream's temptation, one that even the King of Essence succumbed to. He is going to grow up splendidly, get him on your side. I like him. Wrath murmured that he wanted to keep him as his underling. Sniff. Raon raised his head, hearing a sniffing sound. Dorian was watching the children with teary eyes. Eat this, and this. Eat them all. He brought out all his favorite snacks from his belly pocket and piled them up in front of the children. He was a kind-hearted guy. Rescuing the children is one thing, but we need to take care of the bandits. I'm sure they will try to run away once they realize the hostages have been rescued. Yes, where are those bastards? I'm going to snap the necks of that human garbage, no exceptions. As Raon was watching the children eating snacks, Bayan and Martha approached with feverish and angry eyes, respectively. They tapped their sword sheaths, signaling him to bring them to the bandits already. We don't need to. What do you mean we don't need to? We need to finish the mission properly. What's happening here? As Bayan was about to argue, Rimmer and the instructors came out from a bush in the direction of the mountain. There were only 3 instructors missing, those who'd stayed behind to clean up the bandits' traces. Why are there children here? The instructors, including Rimmer, tilted their heads and pretended that they didn't know anything. Even though they already know everything. Raon wrinkled his mouth. He couldn't discern Rimmer's exact location, but he was certainly watching over him. You already know about it. What do you mean? Rimmer shrugged, feigning ignorance. We saved them with Raon. Did you save those children? Yes. How? Didn't the other instructors tell you? Ah, now that I think about it, 3 of them are missing. Where did they go? Ha, I'll explain. Raon sighed and stood up. Rimmer looked like he wanted him to explain it in front of everyone. We found the bandits' tracks in front of a forest inside the hills and started chasing after them. There were very small traces, but we managed to find the bandits deep into the forest after tracking them down. He explained in detail everything that happened that day. So that's how we killed the snow tiger leader and rescued the children. Silence filled the place as he finished his explanation. And nonsense. Bayan swallowed. How could he actually finish the mission while I was digging the wrong hole? Raon was saying he'd rescued the hostages and annihilated the bandits while he was wasting his time. It was an unbelievable story, but he had no choice but to believe considering the circumstances. Damn it! Despite losing in spars and training, he'd resolved to get better accomplishments during the mission at least. He failed once again. No, failing was an understatement. He couldn't even match up to him. Realizing how pathetic he was, he despised his arrogance in the past. Shit! Damn it! Martha turned around and punched a tree. It stripped the bark off the tree and it fell to the ground. That's not a lie. From what she'd seen so far, Raon wasn't somebody who would lie. She was certain that Raon really had rescued the hostages and exterminated the bandits, just him and Runan. Fucking hell! Realizing Raon and Runan were risking their lives while she was arguing with Ban like a child, she felt so frustrated that she wanted to cry. I wanted to end it. She wanted to cancel her promise to follow Raon by completing the mission perfectly, but it was her complete loss. There was no room for excuses. Ha! Acknowledging her loss, Martha sighed heavily. He annihilated the bandits on his own? And he tracked them by himself, then also rescued the hostages. Seriously, what the hell is he? The trainees' chins trembled. Everyone was looking at Runan and Raon, unable to hide their surprise. Is that true? One of the instructors came up to Raon. He looked like he really didn't know any of that. He must have been watching after the others. The Snow Tiger leader's might is at sword users mid-high level. How could you win against him? Are you sure it wasn't a mistake? It's not. How can you be so certain? You can check for yourself. Raon pointed at the bag, which could be called his spoil of war. The instructor nodded and opened the bag. Red hair and a big scar around the eye. It matched the appearance of the Snow Tiger leader, which he had been given when he accepted the mission. His hands were trembling violently as he looked at Raon. There's no mistake. The instructor swallowed and turned to Raon. It was just a verification for the mission, so please don't take offense. Of course. As Raon nodded, the instructor nodded back and returned to Rimmer. Rimmer probably made him do that. Judging from Rimmer's playful gaze, Raon realized he was the one behind it. It was probably to convince those that couldn't believe it or were doubting him. As a result, the gazes the trainees directed at him and Runan were filled with admiration and astonishment. I wonder why. Rimmer had been kind to him, more than an instructor should have been. Since he was so different from the instructor in his previous life, he couldn't honestly understand why. Then, is the mission over? But we didn't do anything yet. Can we really leave now? The trainees were glad that they could return to their homes and rest easy, but they also seemed worried since they hadn't done anything during the mission. Don't be so depressed. Rimmer smirked, looking at the awkward trainees. It's pretty rare for anyone to skillfully complete their first mission. Those instructors also kept making mistakes, or couldn't do anything at all during their first mission. The instructors nodded, confirming what he said. Then what about Raon and Runan? Yeah. They finished the mission by themselves. Well, those are the rare people we call monsters. You should already be used to them, shouldn't you? Actually, I also did great on my first mission. It was a huge ruckus. I rushed at the enemies holding a single sword. Rimmer giggled and started describing his performance on his first mission. That bastard's story isn't even amazing. Back in Devildom, the King of Essence froze an entire castle during his first battle. It became a legend throughout the entirety Devildom. Ha! Raon shook his head. His eardrums started to hurt because of how much Wrath was talking. Rimmer announced the mission's completion and said they would return to the house the day after. The trainees immediately started to prepare a meal, and Runan, who'd already grown close to the kids, ate with them. While Raon was eating dinner on his own, Rimmer came up to him. "Good job." Holding the bowl full of solid ingredients, Rimmer sat down next to him. "Well, that was the mission. There are countless people that can't complete a mission despite being qualified as swordsmen, so you did really great in comparison. You could have done better in some aspects, though." Rimmer spooned the soup and ate it. Murmuring that it tasted bad, he put the bowl aside. Bandits aren't easy opponents like in the stories. They can utilize the mountain as well as the elves, and their savagery doesn't lose to orcs. They are even worse if they belong to or are aiming to join the South-North Union. "Yes." Raon nodded silently. The decision to save the children worked out, but if they had a warrior above the level of expert, you and Runan would have died instead. "So, you were watching us after all." "Well, it just happened." Rimmer grinned and continued. "You did great today. However, in the future you should decide whether you should act alone or call the other people after confirming the enemy's number and might, as well as the presence of and the state of the hostages. Since you are the top trainee, you should improve your decision-making ability." He wasn't wrong. Raon had countless experiences in killing, but he was a bit lacking since it was the first time that he had to rescue hostages. Since he was going to have allies with him more often than he'd be alone while he was with Sieghart, it was important to improve his decision-making accordingly. You don't need to feel dejected. Since you and Runan chose the best course of action, you will grow up splendidly in the future. "Thank you." Rimmer put his thumbs up. Raon silently closed his eyes and accepted his compliment. "Ah, and those children will be brought to the house. Apparently, they have nowhere to go since their entire family is dead." "I see." Raon scratched the ground. He felt bitter oddly, despite it being a stranger's business. Since they got close to Runan, I'm going to ask if House Sullian can take them in. That would be nice. The children listened to Runan, so that seemed like a good idea. Raon Sieghart. When he was about to eat the soup to calm his bitter mind, Bayan, who'd already finished eating, came up to him and opened his pouting mouth. "I admit it. Today was my complete loss. You and Runan finished the mission while I was as wrong as a broken clock. However," he raised his trembling fist, "I won't give up. I'll catch up to you one day, even if that means I have to get rid of thousands of training shoes." Without even waiting for the answer, Bayan turned around. He returned to the collateral trainees just like that. "What was that? Why training shoes?" Since he couldn't understand what he was talking about, he decided to continue eating and picked up his spoon. At that moment, a snorting sound came from the wooden column to his right side. It was Martha. She was crossing her arms with a cold expression on her face. Pathetic. Without specifying who she was talking about, she went into the forest. "Your life is full of trouble." Rimmer grinned and put down the bowl. Despite complaining about its taste, the bowl was completely empty. "Whose fault do you think that is?" Raon frowned. He was the one who'd stirred the trainees up by instigating an instructor. Yet he was talking like he didn't know anything about it. "Whose fault is it?" Rimmer giggled and asked back. "You need rivals to grow properly at your age. They will become trustworthy allies in the future, so get along with them." After saying that, he disappeared with a green wind. "Rivals, huh?" As soon as Rimmer left, wrath popped out of the bracelet. The King of Essence also had 6 rivals. The strongest was obviously the King of Essence, but they weren't too bad. Raon sighed and piled up the empty bowls. "Why are there so many crazy people around me?" Raon and the trainees returned to the house in a week. Some trainees were worried about the fact that they didn't do anything during the mission, but they were mostly happy because they could rest comfortably once again. Rumble. Sieghart's main gate, which looked like layers of steel towers, opened majestically. As the gatekeeper was letting them pass, a big man over 2 meters tall came out from inside. He was Iliun, the external commander. Runan Sullian, Raon Zighart. His eyes sparkled as he called for Raon and Runan, who were standing at the very back. The head of house has summoned the two of you. Prepare to present yourselves at the Lord's manor immediately. We've been summoned? Raon furrowed his brow, looking at Runan, who was holding the children's hands. Runan didn't seem to know the reason either as she tilted her head. You don't need to be surprised. External Commander Iliun gave a refreshing smile. Awarding the most accomplished trainees in their first mission is Zieghart's custom. That's right. You don't need to be nervous since he must be calling you to compliment you. Rimmer looked slightly excited as he nodded, murmuring that it wasn't a big deal. However, there was one thing neither Rimmer nor Iliun had mentioned. Complimenting the trainees that did well on their first mission had happened before, but calling them to the Lord's manor had never happened. Chapter 59. Raon changed his plans to start training as soon as he returned, instead heading towards the Lord's manor. He felt heavy pressure weighing down on his shoulders from the audience chamber's gigantic and antique door, despite having seen it multiple times before. It wasn't because of the door's size, but because of the absolute being on the other side. Don't be so nervous. He won't say anything bad today. Rimmer grinned and patted his shoulder from behind. MHM. Runan's humming could be heard next to him. Despite being nervous while rescuing the children, no trace of tension could be found when she was about to greet the head of house. She was a strange one indeed. Thud. The audience chamber's door opened with a huge noise, similar to a giant's footsteps. A powerful pressure stormed out, opening the door completely. Withstanding the pressure that was as endless as a furnace's flame, they entered the audience chamber. And Glenn was there, at the center of the threatening pressure. Like always, he was sitting on a golden throne and looking down at them. Greetings, my lord. After Rimmer's greetings, Raon and Runan knelt down at the same time. Was he supposed to compliment us? Raon wrinkled his nose. The wave of energy directed at them was too fierce for it to be a compliment. Stand up. Glenn's dignified voice resounded as he waved his hand. Raon Zighart, Runan Sullian. I heard that you did well on your first mission. We've merely done our best. Raon bowed once again and Runan copied him. I did already hear about it, but do tell me what you did. Yes, sir. When we arrived at the foothold, there were 4 locations where the bandits could have been hiding. Although the bandits were as strong as the beasts in the mountain, I suspected that they would have been hiding somewhere else in order to shake off the pursuers. Therefore, Raon explained everything that happened during the mission to Glenn, who didn't really look interested. He didn't nod or blink. He kept listening to the end without any reaction whatsoever, to the point that Raon felt awkward. It's just as I heard. Wiping out the enemies and rescuing hostages in your first mission is certainly an extraordinary achievement. However, Glenn's eyes were bleak. That was too clumsy. If you'd made the slightest mistake, or if the bandits were a bit stronger, or if you hadn't coordinated as well as you did, then those children would have died and you would have been seriously injured. It felt like his heavy voice was pressing upon his head. Planning is important, especially for trainees that don't have any experience. You should only act after making multiple backup plans. Yes. Actually, you should have contacted the other trainees and led them upon finding the bandits' tracks. Your experience and might are too shallow to deal with everything on your own. I'm sorry. Raon lowered his head once again. How is this a compliment? He was sure he heard Glenn was going to compliment them, but he kept pointing out his mistakes after a small compliment in the beginning. However, it's a fact that you succeeded despite your methods being full of holes. When Glenn gestured with his chin, his butler Ren brought a golden plate forward. I award you a bronze tablet for your accomplishment in the mission and the rescue of the children. You did a great job. Ren handed over the bronze tablet with a gentle smile. Thank you. Raon and Runan accepted the tablet with both hands and bowed to Glenn. "Ah, I have something to ask." "What is it?" "What shall I do with this elixir?" Raon took out the Teuton flower that he took from the snow tiger leader. The flower bud, yet to blossom, was rolled up in a circle. Glenn watched the Teuton flower for a bit, then shook his head. "Since you've acquired it, it is yours. Take it." "Okay." Raon tilted his head slightly. Since the elixir was rather rare, he didn't expect him to just give it to him. "You should leave now." He leaned back and rested his chin in his hands, signaling that the audience was over. Raon and Runan bowed and stepped back, leaving the audience chamber. The audience chamber, only 3 people remaining inside, was filled in silence for a moment. "Put!" Rimmer burst into laughter, unable to bear the silence. "Why are you laughing? And why are you here when I didn't even call for you? I mean, if you wanted to hear about Raon's accomplishment from him personally, you should have just asked him honestly. What were all those excuses?" Rimmer grinned, watching Glenn frown. He really isn't honest. Since he'd already sent the report, Glenn was already aware of everything that had happened during the mission. Glenn was worried about his grandson, and the sight of him giving him advice while pretending to scold him was just too funny. Is this what we call a meanie grandfather? Shut up. Huff. Rimmer hit his mouth with both hands. It looks like the head of house is also looking at Raon as a potential successor. What? His own progress is more important than taking care of the others, since he's still a trainee. But the reason you asked him to lead the trainees was in preparation for when he would challenge the throne of Zieghart, right? Glenn didn't respond to Rimmer's sharp remark. He was simply looking at him silently. It looks like you really cherish Raon. You didn't even do that when you were raising the young masters. You are being too noisy. How about being a bit more honest now? I'm sure Raon would like it if you tried saying good job, grandson. Come here so I can hug you, peekaboo. Rimmer. Glenn's pressure grew fiercer. Not just the audience chamber, but the entirety of the Lord's manor started trembling. Huff. Pretending to not laugh, Rimmer moved far away. He. When Glenn's pressure was about to explode, Ren interfered with a gentle smile. It's pretty nice. What is nice? It's been 30 years since I last saw you two playing around together. I haven't seen that reaction from my lord for a really long time, either. Ren's wrinkled eyes were recalling the old memories. Oh, I knew it. Sir Ren knows what's up. Glenn eased his pressure and Rimmer smiled once again. Ah, and there was one thing Raon didn't mention. Are you talking about the South-North Union? Yes. Their young leader heard Raon's name and left. Why didn't you stop him? He withdrew, facing Raon's spirit. It wasn't our territory, and since he acknowledged Raon, I didn't really want to catch him. Oof. Glenn snorted, but he didn't look displeased. And lastly, I'd like you to be a bit more honest with your grandson. It's not that hard. I'm always honest with everyone. No way. If you were honest, you would have been like this. Rimmer cleared his throat, folding his hands behind his back like an actor. Raon. I'm so proud that you've accomplished your mission so well. My grandson, give your grandpa a kiss. This much is enough to make Raon happy, yourself happy, and even me happy as I watch you. Everyone would be happy. Ha! Glenn sighed heavily and stood up from the chair. An energy wave threatening enough to destroy the world filled the audience chamber. I'll be leaving then. I got a drink, an important appointment. Rimmer walked backward while rubbing the back of his head and left the audience chamber. Tisk, he's getting smugger every time. Glenn clicked his tongue and lowered his hand. I still liked it. It reminded me of when you were commanding the continent together. Ren smiled lightly, moving to the side. Oof. Without saying anything, Glenn crossed his arms and leaned his back. Since all this seems to be thanks to the young master Raon, I took a liking to him. It's fine to like him on the inside, but you should treat everyone equally, whether they are successors or other children. You are absolutely right. Ren bowed, smiling. As he raised his head, he saw Glenn. Despite what he said, the corners of his mouth were higher than usual. Raon headed to the annex building as soon as he left the Lord's manor. He considered training right away, but he figured relieving Sylvia and the maids, who must have been worried, came first. When he reached the annex building, loud noise was coming from inside. That's how it should be around here. The annex building was always noisy and active. He was already feeling at ease. Raon opened the annex building's door brightly. Ha! His eyes were wide. There was somebody he'd never expected in the annex building. Dorian? Dorian was standing in the lobby, and Sylvia, Helen, and the other maids were surrounding him. Oh, is the young master back? Why are you here? Ah, Madam asked me to come by after the mission and tell her about what happened. Then. Yes, I told her everything about the young master Raon's touching endeavor. Dorian wiped his tears away. Young master. Ah, our young master really did. The maids were also wiping their tears. It seemed he'd really told them everything. Oh, shit. He was going to fudge over it to avoid worrying Sylvia and Helen. He'd never expected them to contact him first. Raon. Young master. Sylvia and Helen approached him at the same time, with their hands on their hips. Ah, that wasn't my intenti. Good job. As he was about to give excuses, Sylvia hugged him and patted his back. Ha! Raon's eyes widened at the unexpected reaction. Did you really think I was going to scold you for that? You keep telling me to be careful. The reason the Sieghart's ancestors wielded their swords was to protect the weak. Since then, Sieghart has always been protecting the weak and those living in their domain. Sylvia's red eyes glittered like rubies. I also wanted to become a swordsman with the old Sieghart's spirit, so there's no way I would scold you for saving the hostages and risking your life. She grabbed his hand tightly. He felt like his exhaustion was being wiped away by her warmth. Mom is really proud of you. MHM. That's so true. I gotta visit the main building tomorrow. I'll boast about this to everyone. Sylvia hugged him once again. Helen and the maids nodded with teary eyes. I don't get it. Raon sighed. Emotions are really difficult to understand. However, he didn't dislike their warmth. Anyway, that damn Dorian. He turned his head, looking for Dorian, but he was nowhere to be seen. That coward ran away a long time ago. Damn it! He was a light-footed one for sure. After eating in the annex building, Raon changed his clothes and went to the 5th training ground. Sylvia and Helen were telling him to rest for the day, but he wanted to move his body. Is that him? Yes. Raon Sieghart. His build isn't that great, and his pressure is weak. But he really wiped out the bandits on his own. I guess, since Rimmer doesn't lie, although he sometimes exaggerates. He could feel the swordsman's blatant gazes while walking to the training ground. It seemed the news about the mission had already spread throughout the house. Seriously, that man. He sighed, since it was obviously the red-haired elf's doing. Wiping out 30 bandits, including a mid-high tier sword user, is an extraordinary achievement. There were rumors about him being at his deathbed from his illness, so I guess he was lucky. He felt awkward hearing compliments for the first time when he was used to being insulted or looked down on. However, his mood and mind were for him to decide. He didn't need to care about what others said. Raon entered the 5th training ground while listening to the swordsman without paying much attention. Naturally, it was empty. He warmed up and unsheathed his sword from his waist. Slowly lifting it, he put it in front of his energy center. Maintaining the middle posture, he recalled his last fight. I was a bit slow. The bandits got in his way, but he could have beheaded the Snow Tiger leader from the beginning. Because he was too concerned about the children and the other bandits, he reacted too slowly, ending up wasting a lot of time. The important part of a real battle was how he used his abilities. That was why it was safe to say that he'd failed. However, since he was aware of that fact, since he knew what the problem was, and how to solve it, he could fix it. My aura and body aren't on the same page. His body moved exactly the way he wanted, but his aura was slightly late. It was necessary that his aura and body moved at the same time, like the two blades of a pair of scissors. Ha! Raon calmed his breathing and slowly brandished his sword. The aura emanating from his energy center followed the sword. Despite being a slow movement, the space was mercilessly split apart. Even though he didn't move that much, Raon's back grew wet with perspiration. The slow movement required even more strength. Raon swung his sword slowly until the energy from the 10,000 flames cultivation was exhausted. Once his aura was exhausted, he went to the cultivation room to replenish it. Then he went out to swing his sword once again. As such, the first day of his return was wet with sweat. A small pub in the back alley of Sieghart's domain. The pub should have been filled with different people's voices, yet only one man's voice could be heard. That's how my students saved the children that were tied up by the bandits. The bandit boss was using an aura in his saber, but Raon split it in half. The red-haired elf was telling Raon and Runan's story, standing on the table as if he was giving a speech. Judging from the way his face turned red, he was completely drunk. Wow! Did you finally find your aptitude, Rimmer? You taught them really well. No way, he just happened to meet good students. I guess. It's hard to imagine that elf as a good teacher. The giggling people didn't even look like swordsmen. They seemed to be average citizens. It's both. Both. My students are the best among the current Sieghart's trainees. No, they are the best among the 6 kings. Rimmer grinned and poured the beer in his mouth. Some of them agreed with what he said, and others thought the 6th training ground and the other groups were just as good. The two camps started arguing soon enough. Hey, stop fighting and pay me since you heard a great story. I lost everything from betting on that 5th horse, so I need to take my revenge. As he was putting down his empty beer glass and frowning, a gold coin fell on the table. Ha! Rimmer raised his head after watching the gold coin for a while. With a tough face and broad shoulders, the man looked like a general on a battlefield. It was the 6th training ground's head instructor, Metin. Metin? It's been a long time. Indeed. Metin slowly nodded. Anyway, thank you. Ha, can you let me go now? He tried picking up the gold coin Metin placed on the table, but he couldn't take it because of his finger. Can you take responsibility for what you just said? For what? That the 5th training ground is the best among Sieghart's trainees. Of course, my students are the best. You like betting, if I remember correctly. Metin's eyes were heating up. Shall we make a bet? Chapter 60. A bet? Rimmer furrowed his brows, looking Metin up and down. What kind of bet do you want to make so suddenly? A bet to prove that the 5th training ground is really the best among Sieghart's trainees. Ah, you want to bang out? Stop talking so vulgarly as a Sieghart instructor. Fighting and banging out, it's the same thing. It's just more intuitive. Rimmer grinned and finished drinking his beer. Metin remained stiff, like a stone statue. Even though they were both head instructors, their personalities were the complete opposite. Oh, are Rimmer and Metin fighting each other? It's not them, but they're making their students fight. Then the 5th and 6th training ground? That's huge. The people in the pub all stood up and gathered around Rimmer and Metin. I'm betting my entire fortune in Metin. Hell no, Rimmer's going to win this one. Martha, Ben, Runan, and there's also Raon, who won against those 3. That's right. The 6th training ground has many collaterals, but there's no members of the direct line. It's pretty obvious the 5th training ground is going to win. Your information is trash. Trash. Do you really not know that Sir Keen joined the 6th training ground recently? Hearing that a member of the direct line had joined them, everyone looked at him. Huh? Wasn't he injured in a mission? It's already been a year and 6 months, dummy. Oh, then it's hard to tell. Sir Keen was famous for his talent, especially his senses and the purity of his aura. It's not just hard to tell, but the 6th training ground has the advantage. Sir Keen and the collaterals that follow him are already 16 years old. This is interesting. Let's go. Let's gamble. People in the pub started taking out their money while shouting the 5th and 6th training grounds names, as if the bet was already established. Wow, I'm going to get beaten to death if I refuse. Rimmer grinned. Despite what he said, he looked like he was enjoying it. Metten's expression didn't change. It seemed he'd already expected that to happen. But why do you want to bang out all of a sudden? It's not banging out. Don't mind the details. Do you really not know? Is it because of the Owen Kingdom? Rimmer raised his beer glass while scratching his chin. Yes. Because the Owen Kingdom only asked for a spar at the 5th training ground after watching the 6th training ground, the children's pride was trampled. But that's because they've been slacking. You're not wrong. It was because the trainees hadn't been doing their best, and I was the same. However, it's different now. Metten continued, watching Rimmer's fuzzy eyes. Ever since Keen Sieghart transferred 5 months ago, the 6th training ground has changed. Everyone came out during the daybreak and trained until night, and we even passed Hell Week recently. Hell Week? Rimmer's jaw dropped. Yes, there wasn't a single dropout. That's amazing. Hell Week was part of Sieghart's training, famous for its difficulty. There were dropouts among the regular swordsmen. It was pretty amazing that every trainee managed to pass. I thought it was about time to teach them the feeling of accomplishment. And you are going to use the 5th training ground as the sacrificial lamb? Metten answered the question with his silence. I like it. Rimmer grinned and tapped the table. What about the method? Is it going to be one-on-one spars? No, we can't win against the 5th training ground yet with one-on-one spars. Metten shook his head. Then how do you want to fight? One-on-one isn't the only way. Ah. Rimmer grinned and tapped the table. Is it a team battle? Yes. The 5th training ground has 43 people, so we will also prepare 43 people. Let's decide on a location and make them fight. It'd be difficult to call it an all-out war. I guess it'd be a local war. Murmuring that it would be good, he touched once again the gold coin that Metten had put down. But I have a suggestion. Suggestion? 6th training ground has over twice as many people as us, right? Indeed. Then it's better to give more opportunities. Bring 60 people. What? Let's fight with 43 of us and 60 from there. Are you looking down on us? Metten's pressure flared up like dry straws. The table started trembling. I'm not looking down on you, I'm telling you the truth. You gotta admit they lack in power and experience. And we have more direct line, vassal family, and upper collaterals. Nobody's going to point their fingers at you for fighting with 60 people. After considering it for a bit, Metten nodded. Alright, let's do that. And you decide the date and location. I do. What are you gonna do if I trick you? Metten's serious eyes wavered for the first time. I know you aren't the type to cheat with something like this. Metten's strength left the hand on the gold coin, and Rimmer took it without missing the opportunity. But you are mistaken about one thing. Metten turned his head around after taking his hand off from the gold coin. Mistake? Keen Sieghart cultivated his aura and trained his senses every day during the year-and-a-half period where he couldn't move his body from his injury. Ha! His senses and amount of aura doesn't lose to a regular swordsman. He confidently looked upon Rimmer. You'd better prepare thoroughly. Because Keen might wipe them out all by himself. This is the down payment for the bet. Metten took out a gold coin pouch from his chest, placed it in front of Rimmer, then left the pub. Wow! Can we also spectate? Open the gambling place already. I'm betting my entire fortune on the 6th training ground. I'm betting on the 5th training ground. You are talking big with your meager fortune. I'm betting my house. Once the bet was established, the pub became so messy that the roof seemed to throb. Tapping on the gold coin pouch, Rimmer smiled. Free money is great. He looked calm, as if he already knew it was coming. Then, shall I go to the gambling house? Dim daybreak, before sunrise. At the annex building's dark, empty plot, Raon was sitting with his eyes closed. A red haze, thinner than leaf, was shimmering on his shoulders. Opposed to the heated sun rising up, the red energy coming from Raon's body gradually subsided, eventually disappearing completely. Raon opened his eyes. Blink. Like the sun rising in the sky, his red eyes flared up with an intense heat. Ha! Once Raon exhaled the remaining impurity from his body, his burning eyes returned to normal. Time really flows quickly. He stood up, watching the sun slowly rise. 3 days had already passed since he had returned from his first mission. Thanks to training for those 3 days, his body and aura were somewhat synchronized. Clang! After spinning his wrist and ankle, Raon drew his sword. Using the 10,000 flames cultivation, he practiced the star combining sword from beginning to end. Aura was following behind his body, just like a shadow. It wasn't perfect, but it had significantly improved compared to 3 days ago. Let's leave it here for now. After all, it was something to work towards for the rest of his life. Complete synchronization between body and aura wasn't something that could be done in a span of a few days. Since it would lead to the sword-body unification, he needed to train constantly. After practicing Sieghart's basic swordsmanship from the beginning to the end, Raon sheathed his sword. When he looked up at the sky, the sun had risen pretty high. I'm a bit late. Daybreak's personal training time was about to end. He needed to arrive at the training ground before the regular morning training started. Raon changed his sweat-drenched clothes and ran towards the 5th training ground. As he was about to open the door and enter, the trainees' voices could be heard from inside. Why is he not here? This is so unusual. Since he completed the mission on his own, he must not feel the need for the daybreak training anymore. TSK, anyone could have done it in his place. I know, right? It was just a bandit, after all. They said there was an aura user, but how strong a bandit can possibly be? He just got lucky. He could tell from the voice alone. They were collateral trainees, those that parted from Bun, unable to keep up with his changes. Pathetic. Raon clicked his tongue. The loser's chatter wasn't worth his attention, since they were going to avoid his gaze and run away the moment he entered. But the training ground is a bit cold. As he was about to enter, feeling the unusual temperature of the training ground, a familiar voice could be heard. Pathetic. It was Bowen's voice. The elegant sound of footsteps stopped in front of the trainees. Anyone could have done it? Then, did you manage to find the bandits' tracks back then? Or did you manage to rescue the children? I guess you must have at least killed a bandit? That's. Sir Bayan, we were just kidding. The trainees didn't know what to say and just mumbled. Jealousy is an emotion that anyone can have. However, the moment you speak it out aloud, you become the most disgraceful human. I know all about it because I've tried it already. Get a grip. Thud. As soon as Bayan finished talking, someone jumped down from a tree. Ha, I would have broken your skulls if he wasn't there. It was Martha. Her angry voice could be heard near the trainees. Know your place. If you'd met the bandit leader back then, he would have killed your punk asses already, or an instructor watching over you would have drug you out like a dog. Lady Martha. What did you do during the break after the mission? You must have been taking it easy since you felt like you needed some rest after the mission. You probably didn't even train. That's... The trainees could only lick their lips because Martha had nailed it. That damn bastard, the one that single-handedly completed the mission, came out to the training ground and practiced while you were sound asleep in your homes. He even did that on the day he returned. Really? Ask him yourself if you can't believe it. Martha smiled coldly and jeered at the trainees. You know too well about what he did. Did you stalk him? What? What the hell is this son of a bitch saying? Martha punched the wall at Bian's joke. Am I right? How do you know if you didn't see him yourself? I think shackling that mouth of yours would allow me to know. Bian and Martha started exuding pressure like they were about to start a fight. Ha! Raon felt an unknown emotion, similar to tapping his chest with a finger, and opened the training ground's door. The noisy and bustling training ground fell silent. Bian and Martha, who were about to fight, turned their heads. Raon! As he was watching those two, Runan approached him with shining silver eyes. White frost was shimmering from her shoulder. It was her. He was wondering why the training ground was cold, but apparently it was because Runan was emitting a serious amount of frost. You must be out of your mind because you completed a mission on your own. You're even late for daybreak training. Despite standing up for him earlier, Martha was now taunting him. I trained at home, don't worry. Raon simply answered, then went to the center. The regular training starts soon. Everyone, line up. The trainees gathered behind Raon with slightly dissatisfied expressions. Warm up until training begins. A nearly invisible, faint smile appeared around Raon's mouth as he turned his head and told them to warm up. 2 months had passed since they completed their first mission. People were looking at Raon differently, but he only focused on the synergy between the star-combining sword and river footwork, not caring about anything else. This is boring. How can you keep repeating the swordsmanship and footwork that you've already learned? Does boredom not exist in you? Of course not. Raon chuckled. I'm bearing with it since it's important training. Everyone knew that the basics were important, but most people made the mistake of focusing on advanced techniques, giving up on basic training. The reason was simple. Competition. Because it feels like I'm falling behind. While one was repeating the plain sword technique and footwork, if others were using the sword aura and creating the sword wind, one would naturally be dispirited and uneasy. And it's seriously boring. The basic swordsmanship and footwork were simple and plain. Even a trainee with average talent could learn the form in a single week. Nobody would have found it fun to keep practicing that for several months, or years, over and over. Raon was the same. Repeating the basic swordsmanship and footwork was painful to him, as well. But I have to do it. Diligently training the basics was like making ladders on a cliff. Those who climbed with their hands and feet would advance faster, for instance, but the one with a ladder would become faster and reach a higher place in the future. Since he was confident in his patience more than anyone in the world, Raon kept practicing his basic swordsmanship, footwork, and the ring of fire during the personal training time. Wow, doesn't he ever get bored? How can he keep repeating the star-combining sword over and over? He's crazy. Really crazy. I can't live like that. I really can't. The trainees were amazed at Raon, who kept repeating that basic technique. It wasn't mockery or jeering, they were simply amazed. I know, right? How is he just repeating that? I think he's probably gone crazy. The trainees turned around, hearing a pleasant voice. Eek. Instructor. How come you're here so early? Hello. The head instructor Rimmer grinned and waved his hand. Basics being boring is a fact, but he is going to reach higher. I've never seen anyone not reach the high ground among the swordsmen that have worked hard on their basics. After saying that, he went up to the platform. Everyone, attention! Rimmer clapped his hands and drew everyone's attention. The trainees stopped their personal training and ran up to him. What's the matter? Baen raised his hand. He was tilting his head, curious about why he came out early during the daybreak independent training time. Ah, I should have told you about it before, but I forgot. Pardon? You forgot? What did you forget again? The trainees asked lightheartedly, believing it must not have been a big deal. However, his response surpassed their expectations by far. We are going to beat up those 6th training ground guys. Beat up? 6th training ground? Are you perhaps saying that we are going to spar with them? Rather than spar, it's more like an all-out war. 43 of you and 60 of them will be fighting at once. When is it? Bun's face stiffened like a tree, and the other trainees also swallowed. Enjoying those expressions, Rimmer grinned. Tomorrow.